Just about a year ago, I heard about a book by the author Gareth Higgins called How Not to Be Afraid. And I thought, I would love to not be afraid. So I picked it up and then discovered in the very introduction to this book that Gareth Higgins is not about us not having any fear. Fear is actually useful, he says. Fear makes you do things like put on your seatbelt when you get in the car, right? We do that. What he talks about is the part of our fear that's not about the reality of danger, but that's about the story we tell ourselves about danger. Gareth knows a few things about fear. He grew up in Ireland during the Troubles, and bombings and the threat of bombings were part of his everyday life. He said there was no family in his neighborhood that was untouched by that violence. And he confesses in his introduction that maybe a better title, or another title for the book would be How to Be Afraid Well, rather than How Not to Be Afraid. And I remember reading that and thinking, I would have seen that title, but I probably wouldn't have bought the book, which is why he named it How Not to Be Afraid, right? So what Gareth suggests is that when we are afraid, we don't just run from our fears. We don't just let them drive us. We look at them to determine what is something we legitimately need to be concerned about, and then look at the story that we tell ourselves about the fear. And he said, if the story imprisons us, then we would be well served by replacing it with a story that is bigger and better, that sets our fear in a context that uses the energy of that fear for us to seek solutions to the problems at hand. So I thought about that as we read through the lectionary reading and the Annunciation for this Sunday. This conversation between Gabriel and Mary never fails to fascinate me. I love that every time an angel shows up in the Bible, almost the first thing they say is, don't be afraid, which just tells you that there was something about an angel showing up that was terrifying, right? And what Gabriel is announcing to Mary, that she's going to become pregnant and bear God's child, is enough to be very frightening indeed. At best, this will ruin the engagement to her guy, a certain Joseph of Nazareth. At worst, she'll be stoned. And so I think Mary's mind is churning on those real concerns, and I love that she checks out the biology with the angel. You do know I'm a virgin, right? Like, I don't know what angels know about human reproduction, but, there's some details here. And Gabriel doesn't just say you're going to be pregnant. Gabriel says, you're going to be pregnant with the only begotten of God, who is going to become the leader that all of our prophets from Isaiah on have been talking about. This child is the one who's going to bring justice for the poor, who's going to sit on the throne of David, who's going to strengthen the meek, who's going to put the powerful in their place, who's going to make the world so peaceful that the wolf and the lamb will lie down together and all children will be safe. And even while her mind was busy working out the fears and the concerns of this announcement, I think her heart must have leapt at that promise, because she knew that promise. She was a Jewish woman in Galilee. She knew the writings of the prophets. She knew what Isaiah had said and what the vision of God was for the world, and that she might be part of that. I think that woke her up. And then Gabriel says, and your cousin Elizabeth, the one who's been barren all her life and who even now is past the age of having children, she's in her 6th month of pregnancy, And then I think Gabriel must have loved saying, because nothing is impossible with God. And if Mary's heart had leapt at Gabriel's earlier promise, when she hears the news about Elizabeth, I think her heart must have fairly exploded. At first with joy for Elizabeth. Oh my gosh, she's pregnant. She's always wanted to have, this is so great. And also for all of Mary's family, who are all related to her. And also, if this is possible, what else might be possible with God? And Mary says, here I am. Let it be with me. Bible speak for, okay, I'm in. Right? I don't think Gabriel's promise removed Mary's fear. I'm sure that fear was there, and I think there were pieces of that fear that were very useful for her in the coming months and years to come. I do think Gabriel gave her a bigger and better story that her fear could live in and only be a part of, because the story was about what God was doing to redeem the world. And this, I think, is an example for all of us as we deal with the fears in our lives. What is the bigger and the better story that we can tell each other and tell ourselves? Because we all have fears. Some of them are personal and individual to us, about health, about work, about relationship. Some of them are fears that we share about climate, about violence, about politics, about any number of things in the world. How do we live in those well? How are we afraid well? How do we decide not to be afraid badly? One of the ways we do that is remembering who it is that has created us and how it is that God lives through us. I have a couple of examples about this. One of them I wrote about in the newsletter this week. I've just come through a couple of concerts with Kuumba, the gospel choir that I sing with at Harvard College. And the last 2 nights, I cannot tell you the joy of singing with an amazing choir, singing old songs about people who have come through the trials of slavery. One of those songs, the soloist was our director, Sheldon Reed, and it is so powerful to watch him sing. At first they called us animals, and then we became 3/5 of a man. And I don't know how they got through it. I don't know how they went day to day, but they did. And now I am here, and I will make a place for those who come after me. Right? That is a story that's bigger and better than just the violence and the horror of slavery. That is a story that works to redeem, that works to make the world a better place. One of Kuumba's we have 2 bylines. One of them is, we're not the competition, we're the standard. The other one is, Kuumba always strives to leave a place better than we found it. And that's part of that story. Right? The other story is something that happened here at the church on November 17th when Elaine Almquist came to do a community defense training. So to train folk to learn how to respond to the presence of ICE in their neighborhoods, and ICE, not snow ice, ICE, and to the deportations that are happening in our communities. She did not make light about the seriousness of what's going on. She was really clear about the fear in our communities, the just fear that these deportations are causing. She also gave us some very practical tips on what we can do to be helpful, how we can help to rally folks in our neighborhoods. And my favorite one that she taught us was, get to know your neighbors. In the face of all that is going on politically, she said, we can build a community that affirms everyone's dignity. And she said to us, how many of you know the person on the right who lives to the right of you? And the person who lives to the left of your home? And the person across the street and the people in back of you? How many of you know the folks in all of the floor of the apartment building where you live? She said, you do not have to agree with them, but say hello, make small talk, get to know them, share phone numbers so that if something happens in your community, you can rally together to make a difference. It was a little early in November, but I would say this week, bring them Christmas cookies, right? And maybe they'll bring you Christmas cookies. Make relationships with your neighbors. In the face of political violence in our world, build a community that affirms the dignity of everyone. That is a bigger and better story for us to live into. So it's the second week of Advent. This is the Sunday that we're celebrating God's peace, and that's partly why there's the reading about the lion or the wolf and the lamb lying down together. That is the kind of peace that we long for. We are on a journey toward Christmas. We are on a journey toward the incarnation of God. We are on a journey toward remembering that God loves this world so much that God came to live among us as Jesus. That's amazing. And we're on a journey to remember again that God still comes to live among us because God comes to live in each one of us. And as we learn better and better how to be afraid well, if not how to not be afraid, we give God space to work in the world. And so I'm going to teach you another breath prayer this Sunday. For those of you who weren't here last Sunday, we gave out these little 1-minute hourglasses. I call them minute glasses. And they're in the basket by the way into the sanctuary. So if you didn't get one last Sunday, pick one up. And what we invited folks to do was for 1 minute each day to say a breath prayer where you say a couple of words on your breath in and a couple of words on your breath out. Last week's breath prayer was, come let us walk in the light of the Lord. Come let us walk in the light of the Lord. Or if like me, you like fewer words, just walk in the light, right? And to do that for 1 minute. So this Sunday, I'm going to invite you to try a different breath prayer this week. And that prayer will be, let me find myself in your great story. Let me find myself in your great story, addressing God. Or again, if like me, you like to have just a few words, myself, your story, right? Myself, your story. And this week, when your timer runs out, turn it over and do your breath prayer for 2 minutes, right? When we do this, we give the Spirit space to come into our lives, space to come into this congregation, space to come into our communities and this world. And just as Mary said yes and had no idea what would happen to her, we too say yes. And we don't know all the details of what will happen. And we know that with God, it will be very